Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, whatever part of the world you're currently listening to this podcast on Spotify and on our YouTube Face Economics TV channel, our video blog. My name is Al Mina, the concept author of the Face Economics, concept, which is the utilization of the social media platform in economic development worldwide. Thank you for joining me on this March the 8th, 2024. So I spent a good portion of last evening listening to the State of the Union speech by Mr. Biden. And, it was kind of mind boggling because he had spoken about, the ongoing war in Ukraine, but he's never touched up on actually de-escalating the situation. It sounded to me that they wanted to fund Ukraine to keep on fighting instead of engaging in a diplomatic process, which would basically end the war and bring both sides to the table and resolve their differences, you know, peacefully. Um, so I thought that was pretty, thought provoking at the first few minutes of his speech. So I tried to just basically identify who's actual winning regarding the overall political environment in the US, and is it serving the interests of the American public uh, when our decision makers are simply, basically talking to us as if they're trying to campaign um, versus informing us on, solutions that they're looking to provide the American people. You know, um, most of what was mentioned um, in last night's speech basically were the same old narrative that every Americans have been, hearing, okay, for many years, not just the last 3 years. Um, the border has always been an issue. You know, um, women's rights has always been an issue. Um, obviously the conflict between the U.S. and Russia has always been a talking point, even though I really don't see, a whole lot of reason to preserve a narrative against, you know, not just Russia, against countries that really is not even interested in, you know, having problems with any other countries. So, who really won in last night's speech and overall State of the Union? Well, I think the smartphone did, because the smartphone, if y'all can see my screen now, uh, everybody's using their smartphone, texting, taking pictures, looking up information. Um, even the president himself picked one up and used it. So there wasn't a whole lot about the evolution of technology that was covered in last night's speech, which I find that very troubling. Okay, folks. Um, Technology is what's, you know, basically it's what's developing capacity worldwide. It's providing various solutions in, you know, societies that are evolving and societies that are currently well developed. So with technology, you know, and the next generation utilizing technology, why aren't we talking about, you know, issues that will be the next generation's, you know, talking points in terms of solution providing, concepts. Okay, folks. Um, those people wanting to come to the US, trying to cross the border, most of them are trying to come to the US because they wanted a better life. They couldn't find that life, that hope, the opportunities in their home countries. And that's why they all trying to flock into the US, because their countries do not provide, the resources and the democracy and the solutions that many Americans are basically utilizing to preserve our democracy, to keep us, ahead of the learning curve, to keep our market stable and advancing and prospering. Okay, folks. Um, we live in a very significantly very different world today compared to, back in the day when many of our decision makers had to, jump through hoops just to get access to a water fountain, that had to, jump through hoops just to, gain access to education. They've lived in a very significantly different world, society, you know, and era. The next generation of Americans will never have to deal with, you know, those kinds of systematically developed, social issue, because most of the next generations simply don't care about, those problems anymore. I mean, they're no longer, relevant. The people that are keeping them relevant are the same people that are making the policy, are decision makers today. The more that you use old, systems and predated management solutions, and introducing that into the marketplace and introducing that in a social structure that is fast evolving. Even they themselves are using technology. They've got it in their hands, and yet they still don't know how to, navigate around it. They don't know how to influence society to utilize technology for the betterment of society. Most people today, especially our decision makers, are utilizing technology in a very outdated and prehistoric, application. Monitoring people, you know, using political gerrymandering, using technology, and even, sharing propaganda on social media that is counterproductive to social development and keeping our market competitive and keeping our people safe and, competitive. Um, you know, it's just baffling to me. I've listened to the speech and read the script that Mr. Biden was reading, and to me, it definitely sounded as if he was trying to campaign and try to endorse ideas and concepts that will not resonate, you know, with the next generation of decision makers in 5 years, 10 years from now. I don't even think it will resonate in the next, 9 months leading up to November. Uh, so yeah, folks, that's the state of our union. Is that we're behind once again. Our decision makers are fighting over issues that are so, you know, unproductive to the point that they're majoring in minor things. Folks. Um, you know, I mean, we have various, you know, issues that are definitely going to be extremely, dangerous in the next 10 to 20 years from now that we need to focus in on specialize and find a solution for. One of them is, the escalation of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine that needs not to be, you know, escalated. You know, it's going to destabilize the region. It's going to, bring a lot of problems into, the marketplace in Europe as well as in the US and other countries. If this war continue to, you know, disrupt markets and disrupt, geopolitics throughout, Europe. So I would think, and you don't have to be, a rocket scientist to, figure this out. I would imagine that people would want to stop the war and to escalate this whole problem because it's not serving anyone any good when people are constantly, dying off of a war that could have been prevented. Okay, folks, think about when all these systems were created, like NATO, for example. It was created during, after World War II to make sure that Europe will be stabilized and no further conflict will arise back in what 1941, I believe, in the 1940s. So as I'm doing this podcast in the year 2024, reflecting all on all of those social conflicts and social issues and war, the escalation of war and diplomatic problems back then, they're basically they develop and evolve because of lack of information and mismanagement of information and the overall misinterpretation of information in today's world where you have social media, when you have all these abundance of information that you can basically you know uh, assess and make an informed decision on. All these human conflict and war situations shouldn't be even happening, unless you want it to happen, unless you think that a war and all these human suffering and economic hardship is, you know, justifiable by a war, which it's not. Okay, folks, if people want to evolve and develop their marketplace, it is possible to do that in today's world. Okay, the boogeyman or the instigators, problem instigators, and bad apples in the past have evolved their capacity and have evolved their social, um, interpretation of a democratic, society. So they're evolving and they're improving, and their capacity is more interested in their overall, government capacity and social capacity is interested in developing their markets, developing, a more favorable you know, democratic society for everyone to utilize in order to grow their markets. Okay, folks, we're definitely not living in the past anymore. We can't possibly think that, what happened way a long, long time ago when these decision makers today were growing up are going to be dealing with the same problems, you know, here on out, from the year 2024 all the way to the year 2030 or even longer than that. The social and market, you know, it, problems will evolve. Okay, folks, it's not going to become stagnant unless you keep it stagnant. You know, uh, I mean, it's really counterproductive. Seriously, folks, to think that you live in a bubble. Okay, all of the markets, every countries are interconnected nowadays. That everyone's basically looking to advance. They're all looking to build capacity. They're not thinking about conflict. You know, I've been studying foreign affairs, international business, commerce, and trade, and geopolitics, geoeconomics ever since I was in middle school. Okay, folks. Um, I saw things evolve so rapidly that there is no need for human suffering anymore. There's no need for war. There's no need for these political mudslinging that is really very counterproductive. All these stuff that they were basically putting on last night during the State of the Union, they're all old school, you know, uh, type of politics. It's like the stuck on stupid type of political, maneuvering. Because, uh, I mean, if you want to solve the problems at the border, okay, that can be solved using technology. You can use, blockchain technology and artificial technology, to manage these border issues. But yet they've never thought outside the box. They never even spoke about, world market concepts. They haven't even talked about, smart cities developing, capacity alongside the border. Smart cities today, as they evolve throughout the world, are able to, utilize technology to manage, the public. It's like I was listening to a State of a Union speech given by a president in his 80s that's still reflecting on the way things were managed when he was growing up. I mean, there wasn't any email solution. You couldn't send emails when he was growing up. You couldn't find anything on YouTube. There was no YouTube. There was no social media when Biden was growing up. There was no, smartphone. He's holding a smartphone today, taking a selfie with people. Okay. That smartphone, this smartphone itself used to be, 600 times bigger than what it is today. I mean, the smartphone today that we're putting in our pocket used to be the size of four refrigerators. Okay, folks. And yet, our decision makers, who are mostly not, technology savvy, these are not mathematicians, these are not scientists. Most of our decision makers are either lawyers or people from a completely different industry growing up and went to training at their university, training them to implement grandfather laws, grandfathers, not laws that look for solution to emerging problems, finding solutions to emerging problems up ahead, because those are the things that will disrupt markets. Those are the things that will disrupt society. Grandfather laws are extremely archaic and shouldn't be the focus of the new world marketplace. Okay, folks. I mean, I mean, I respect these decision makers. I respect they're wanting to contribute, but you can't contribute using, the specs of 50, 60 years ago. How to solve a solution. I mean, how solve a problem with a solution with a schematic and business model and plan that was utilized 60, 70 years ago. This war in Ukraine could have been stopped back in 2022. I mean, I'm listening to politicians, not just in the US, but I'm also listening to politicians in Europe, politicians in other countries, in other continents, and they're all scratching their head trying to figure out why is this war still an ongoing war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, even the war in Israel and Gaza. Why are these people still dealing with the same old problems that are extremely solvable? I mean, look, folks, if you put together people that are younger in today's generation, these individuals that are in their 20s, and put them in a room and tell them to solve the conflict, they will be able to do that. They'll brainstorm and they'll say, okay, let's use, what we've learned through our training. Let's use technology. Let's use things that are applicable in providing a solution to a pre-existing condition that could have been solved 2 years ago, even back in 2014. It could have been solved amicably, diplomatically between Russia and Ukraine. Now it's, you know, destabilizing a lot of geopolitical environment throughout Europe that needs not to be disrupted. This needs not to be escalated. I mean, it's just very counterproductive to listen to a speech that is not providing a solution, rather just telling the world and telling Americans to keep, you know, dragging on this war. Okay, it's extremely very harmful for for anyone to wanting to drag on this war. Okay, folks. So many people already have died because of this preventable war. Okay, there really isn't any need for a war situation to happen anywhere in the world. Okay, folks. With that said, again, if America wants to be stuck on stupid, then that's on America. But not all Americans wants to be stuck on stupid. I think majority of Americans wants to, have a more productive existence. I think majority of Americans wants the conflict between Russia and Ukraine just to escalate and stop altogether. And even that applies to, Israel and Palestine and anywhere. I mean, there's also war going on in Africa, and there's a lot of conflict that's happening in Haiti now. There's a massive coup d'état in Haiti, in the Caribbean, and then there's tons of conflict happening that could be solved, folks, if we just apply our brain capacity to solve these issues. Okay, I mean, when you put old people, and I'm not just saying old people, loosely. I mean, when I say when you put people that grew up in a very different life era, society, age, you know, management, skill set, political opinions, legal interpretations, that is mostly going to be outdated in the next 5 to 10 years, making making some sort of political structure that they think will prevail in the next 10 to 15 years. That's not going to happen. I mean, I just got done listening to another, senator, a younger lady under 50 years old, who whose take is fundamentally, different, but she's still influenced by a old party, a party system that is pulling her back from, incorporating new market skill managements, um, and it's like you know a never-ending struggle. It's like they're recycling, in our governments. They're recycling, issues that are fixable if we think outside the proverbial box. Okay, folks. Um, so with that said, again, I think the smartphone won regarding the state of our union. Okay, everybody was cheering, using their smartphone, and everybody, regardless of party, were utilizing their smartphones. Okay, so obviously, technology is what's going to help create solutions. And I believe the next generation should be experts in utilizing technology to find solutions, not to, continue to, you know, muddle it on a problem, a pre-existing condition that is fairly solvable. Okay. Um, but, the border crisis can be solved. Markets, we could easily find a way to help Mexico, help South American countries to develop their markets. We can easily provide capacity building training for, countries that needs our support and help. Okay, using technology. Okay, so I mean, think about it, folks. If you're stuck on stupid, you will always be stuck on stupid until you think outside the box, until you listen to various school of thoughts. Weigh in on uh, the best way to solve a problem, not just constantly talk about it. You have to actually do something to fix it. You know, um, and look about think about this. When politics, when democracy, and when the rule of law was implemented a long, long time ago, back in the Greek times, even the Roman times, the reason that they had these, democratic ideas and principles and agendas were because the people were educated, supposedly educated, quote unquote, back then were supposed to be educated, and the rest of the society were pretty much, nomadic people, and people that didn't take time to educate themselves. And that was the rights of the republic. Okay. And that's, how the evolution of democracy and society came about. That was back then. There was no smartphone back then. There was no thing that was smarter than an individual back then. Today, the market, societies, and people are significantly different. We have more intelligent people in this era, and never ever before in the history of humanity, that per capita around the world, we the evolution of our thinking capacity had multiplied tremendously. And yet, the people that are making decisions for us are relying on their smartphone to make decisions that they don't even understand how to use. Okay, folks. Think about what I'm talking about now, because things are becoming extremely problematic to the point that people are bringing back the past. Even in Europe, there's this concept of Nazism. Nazism is returning to Europe. Okay, folks, think about it. People fought against Nazism. People fought against Hitler. throughout Europe, you know, and yet there are people today that are trying to bring back that influence in various European countries. Uh, it's extremely counterproductive. I mean, and I was extremely disappointed not to hear a solution to de-escalate the war between Russia and Ukraine. I was dumbfounded not to hear a solution which would revolve around diplomacy. Um, and these people, predominantly of them, okay, I don't think Biden ever served in the military and had to fight in a war theater. I don't think, some of these senators and Congress people were ever in uniform or in any other form of international service. So why are they wanting for the war in Ukraine to continue on? I simply don't understand that. And I think Europe should take the lead on this. I think Europe should, find a way to de-escalate the situation between, Russia and Ukraine, because ultimately this conflict could manifest into an even bigger problem for Europe. Okay, and the European public need to go to their, governments and decision makers in the governments throughout Europe and tell the European Union and tell NATO and tell their decision makers that are supporting, continuous funding to Ukraine to find a way to de-escalate the situation and end the war. I think that's what needs to be said. I mean, I understand Finland and Sweden just joined NATO, but you know what, folks? Find a way to diplomatically solve problems. The war and human, suffering, it, is the last thing you want to happen in the year 2024. Because just like I was showing you, the smartphone technology can be utilized to improve markets and societies. It could also destroy markets and societies if it's being utilized by people that are stuck on stupid. Okay, folks. With that said, thank you so much for giving me the time to provoke your thought and share my opinion regarding the State of the Union speech given by Mr. Biden last night. As I mentioned, I believe the smartphone won the hearts and minds of the public more than the speech did. With that said, thank you for your time. My name is Almina. I look forward to speaking with you again on our next podcast and video blog, Space Economics TV video blog. Hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead. Take care.